Can Boston College make it 2 in a row? We're going to talk with Mitchell Wolf about BC versus Western Kentucky.
You are Locked On Boston College, your daily podcast on the Boston College Eagles. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. This is Locked On Boston College, your team every day. I'm your host, AJ Black. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get yourself started. Boston College and Western Kentucky are going to wrap up BC's out-of-conference schedule on Saturday, September 28th at noon at Alumni Stadium. On today's show, we're going to get into the preview and the predictions. And, of course, as every Friday, we have Mitchell Wolf here of Eagle Insider. Mitch, how's it going?
It's going well. I'm excited to talk about this team. It's an interesting matchup for BC, a good warm-up before they get into conference play. This is a team that'll test them in a lot of ways. So I think we'll, as I say almost every week, I think it's a great opportunity to learn more about what this team is going to be.
So a lot of talk this week has been trap game, that Western Kentucky is the perfect team to be a trap game for the Eagles, that this is a team that's dangerous. What have you seen out of them? I know they started the season off with getting whomped by Alabama, but they've turned it around with 3 straight wins. What have you seen?
You kind of throw the Alabama game out just because the talent advantage is so wide there. Even without Nick Saban, that's still a really talented team, has a good coaching staff. Next 3 games, they play FCS team Eastern Kentucky, who there's kind of a rivalry there, which has a kind of an interesting backstory. They beat them by a lot. Next game, they whomp Middle Tennessee State, who's one of probably the bottom 10 teams in the FBS. And then they beat Toledo in kind of a weird game where Toledo gets out to a lead. Then there's a rain delay. And generally, and I think I'm taking this from Split Zone Duo, that if you look at games where there's a rain delay that's longer than like half an hour, 45 minutes, usually the home team has a really good chance of coming back and winning just because they're more at home, sitting in their locker room for forever. And then so Western Kentucky mounts that comeback. They win by 5, I think 26-21. A lot of turnovers in that game. I would say those teams were pretty evenly matched. So you look at Western Kentucky and you think this is a solid group of 5 team. I think there's some talk about them contending with Liberty for the Conference USA title, maybe get a chance at that G5 spot in the playoff. But like a lot of these group of 5 teams, they just kind of have a fatal flaw, and that's really their defense. And ironically, this year they're a lot better against the run. Last year they were god awful. This year they're better against the run, but really bad against the pass. And I think a lot of it comes from the Middle Tennessee State game, actually, just because Middle Tennessee was just throwing the ball all over the field a bunch of times. But their defense is interesting because they're what I would call like a min-max defense, because they're super blitz heavy. They play a lot of man coverage. But then instead of blitzing, they'll either drop 8 defenders in the coverage. There's not a lot of like standard 4-man rushes with this defense. So what they're trying to do is basically create turnovers, get the ball back to their offense. And if they get beat, they get beat. But if they create enough turnovers, their offense can score enough that they can win most of their games against a group of 5 teams.
Now, when you look at this defense, a lot of times when you look at schools that are G5, they're a lot smaller than when against a bigger BC offensive line. Is that going to be the case against BC?
Actually, no. Their defensive line is pretty big. Their nose tackle, Dallas Walker, I think he's like 6'4", 312. They got another defensive tackle, Hosea Wheeler, who's 6'3", 300. They've got some depth guys who are like normally sized, at least how they're listed. We all know that roster listings can be a bit of can be a bit fugazi. But so this team has some big guys up front, but they just play in light boxes, and their linebackers are pretty undersized as well. So I think BC, in theory, should be able to still run the ball because, again, even though this team, most of their bad run numbers are from against Alabama, but it's, you counter that with saying, okay, well, then they've played some bad group of 5 and FCS teams. So it's not like their good run games are not necessarily any more worthy of looking at than one bad game against Alabama. So I still think that this defense could be had, and I would say they're better players in the secondary. Anthony Johnson Jr., one of their cornerbacks, and Upton Stout, their nickelback, are both pretty good players that would probably be, Power 5, at least rotational players, maybe even some starters at some schools.
Now, let's flip this to the offensive side of the ball. TJ Finley, their starting quarterback at the beginning of the year, he's out. And who do they have who are they replacing him with, and what have you seen from him?
So their backup is Kaden Veldtcamp, who actually started the bowl game last year after Austin Reed opted out to go to the NFL. And he wasn't the initial start in that bowl game. Sorry, he didn't start the bowl game because I believe that Tyson Helton's son started the game. He was bad. Kaden Veldtcamp comes in and Western Kentucky's down by like 3 or 4 scores and he leads them back. I think they have it's like 38-31. They came back from like down like 21-0 or something, which is crazy. This year, TJ Finley comes in after a pretty good year at Texas State, wins the job, doesn't do a lot in the first few games, then he gets hurt. Veldtcamp comes in, he has a monster day against Middle Tennessee State last week, comes back to earth against Toledo's got a good defense, throws 2 interceptions, has a strip sack fumble. So he's a big dude, 6'6", 236 or something like that. His dad is actually the strength and conditioning coach at Western Kentucky. And, kind of just your traditional big pocket passer, kind of think of like a Joe Flacco type, maybe a little more athletic because they use him in the run game a little bit on quarterback power, but he's got a pretty big arm. When I first started watching him, I was a little disappointed, but then as he got into rhythm, he started pushing the ball downfield more and better. That said, like he doesn't move around a ton, and West Kentucky's offense just asks him to like get rid of the ball super quickly, get it out to his weapons with them being spread out really wide with a lot of wide receivers. So this offensive line, they also like just don't run the ball. They don't really care to. The offensive line is obviously much better pass protectors, but even then they still aren't asked to do a lot because of how quickly the ball gets out. So I think that this should kind of be a get right game for BC's pass rush in terms of actually being able to get pressure on the quarterback without having to blitz. And then on the back end, West Kentucky for the last few years had some very talented, productive receivers and guys like I want to say Jareth Stearns. He had a brother that has a similar name, but he was Bailey Zappi's number one receiver. And then last few years with Malachi Corley, who's now with the New York Jets. And this year, I'm not really sure they have that kind of guy. They have I believe it's Keyshawn Johnson, who transferred in from Alabama State. Was a pretty good FCS player this year. He's their leading receiver. He's fine. But I think, a guy like Amari Jackson should be able to handle him. So I think you'll see BC. They play a lot of man against Michigan State, which kind of surprised me. And I think you'll see them continue to do that against Western Kentucky.
And Donovan, one of the big things that we talked about on Monday was the play of the defensive line, and you kind of briefly talked about it earlier, saying that should be their get right game. What are you expecting? Do you think this is a game where Donovan Azaraco and Cam Horsley should feast?
Cam Horsley, absolutely. They've got a pretty good left guard, Quantavious Leslie. He's getting some NFL interest, but their center is a little undersized. He's okay. Their right guard position's kind of in flux. So I think Cam Horsley, he's been beating up every center he's played, including the SEC center Connor Tollison, I think he is from Missouri, and Maurice Smith, who's a solid center for Florida State. So I don't think this is going to be a problem for him. Azaraku, it'll be interesting to see what the defensive ends do because in every game except Duquesne, they've played Azaraku on the weak side of the offensive line, rushing off the left tackle and Akpala on the right, except for Duquesne where they flipped them. So I'm kind of interested to see do they go with a similar strategy against a group of 5, comparing it to an FCS team, a lesser opponent. The tackles for West Kentucky are both okay. I wouldn't say they're anything to write home about. So it'll be interesting to see, do they keep them on one side mostly? Do they actually rotate them around a little bit to confuse the offensive line? I think you could see that happen. But I think both of them, Akpala and Azaraku, should have big days in run defense. Then it's just kind of a matter of, can they get home quickly enough? Can the defensive secondary, maintain coverage long enough to give them time to get home to the quarterback in terms of, can he hold on the ball for more than 2.5 seconds and then give Azaraku and Akpala more time to get back there?
All right. In a moment, we're going to talk about what Boston College has to do to win in this game. You'll hear Mitch's thoughts on that in just a moment. With Robinhood Gold, you don't need a silver spoon to eat up the financial favors of the 1%. Robinhood Gold allows others to get the rates and perks usually reserved for the high society. Now, the resourceful individual with Robinhood Gold can earn the very liberal rate of 4.5 APY on uninvested cash, receive unlimited 1% deposit bonuses, and be rewarded with a handsome 3% retirement boost on an IRA account. Robinhood Gold provides the privileges of a high net worth for any net worth. These generous benefits are now available for only $5 per month. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. Sign up at Robinhood.com/gold. Terms apply for product-specific disclosures. Visit Robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risk. Risk rates may change. Gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold, LLC. This is Locked On Boston College. I'm your host, AJ Black, here with Mitchell Wolf of Eagle Insider. Make sure to check out all of our work there. We have the visitors list for this upcoming weekend. We have previews. We got predictions. We've got everything up there, including some basketball news, hockey news. We've got a lot of stuff going on. Make sure that you check out Eagle Insider when you're done with today's episode. Now, Mitch, we're looking at the spread that last I had seen was 11.5. Is that correct?
Sorry, I believe it's up to 12 and a half, and I actually saw 13 some places. So I think people are kind of pushing the line towards BC, which is an interesting inversion of what happened last week, where the line actually moved towards Michigan State pretty late and pretty heavily, I think by 2 points by the time kickoff came around, which was pretty surprising.
And a friend of the show, Parker Fleming, he had a prediction of BC winning by what, 19.5?
No, I think it was like 44. Or was it was 32 and a half, I think. His metrics are a little different. And actually last week he predicted BC to lose, or based on his personally created spread. I'm trying to pull his website up now, but it's not loading. But I think the prediction was like BC 44, Western Kentucky 14 or something crazy like that, which is a little generous, I think.
Okay. So let's talk about this game. What does Boston College need to do to beat Western Kentucky?
I think the biggest thing is they need to be able to handle Western Kentucky's blitz. Western Kentucky blitz is at the second highest rate in the FBS at like 55% of dropbacks or something crazy like that. They're the second highest in 6-man blitzes behind Pitt, and nobody runs more snaps of cover 1 6-man blitzes than Western Kentucky. So far, BC has not been blitzed a lot. Teams are dropping back into zone coverage, basically daring Thomas Castellanos beat them with his arm or scramble when all the defense is looking at him in zone coverage. So the question is Western Kentucky going to keep blitzing, or are they going to change their defensive philosophy? In the past, when they've played Power 5 teams with this defensive corner, they still have blitz. They blitzed on 50% of dropbacks in, I think, each one of the Power 5 opponents they faced in the last 3 years. So I think you're going to see them keep blitzing, which is good for Castellanos because I think that makes his job easier. He can identify matchups more easily. The offensive line is going to need to be on their toes because, depending on who's going to stay in the protection, are they going to keep the running back and the tight end in to block? Are they going to slide? Which way are they sliding? Because Western Kentucky uses a lot of weird, unorthodox fronts when they blitz. So you're going to see guys, like a bunch of guys lined up in line of scrimmage, and you don't really know who's coming. And BC has had, I would say, a little bit of trouble with that so far this season. It's not like unique to them. Those blitzes are designed to confuse offensive lines, and it happens to everybody. But that's something they have to be aware of. The thing that I'm going to be tracking is what kind of motion BC does before the snap. And currently they are running the third most pre-snap motion among FBS teams. It's Navy, Army, BC, Air Force. And I say using that motion, not necessarily running every play they do it. We had a confusion about that on the board. So they're just using that motion exceptionally high. And motion is a great thing for information gathering because when you move a player, how the defense responds can usually tell you what kind of coverage they're in, whether it's man or zone. And what I think BC is going to do is actually employ these formational shifts where one thing that I would love to see is, and Patriots used to do this all the time, is they would come out with super heavy personnel, 2 running backs, 2 tight ends, and wide receiver. And they come out like a heavy formation, and then they do, some teams call it explode, but it's basically where everybody goes out to an empty formation, and you've got like the 2 backs as the farthest out wide receivers, the 2 tight ends in the slot, and then your other receiver as the nearest receiver to the ball. And I think that'd be great for BC because you get Western Kentucky to possibly put their base defense on the field, and then you can pass against lesser athletes with more interesting personnel. And I'm sure that Berge Najarian is going to be mad at me for discussing Patriots secrets in a public forum, but I think he's in a pretty good mood today, so hopefully he'll forgive me. But that's something I'm looking at on offense. On defense, it's kind of the inverse. BC has not blitzed a ton. They did against Duquesne and Missouri a little more, but Kaden Veldtcamp does pretty good against the blitz so far. So I think what you want is you don't want to give him easy answers. So kind of use a similar game plan to Florida State. Don't blitz a ton, but maybe use some sim pressures, but just drop guys into coverage, play man when you can. Because like I said, I don't think Western Kentucky has that dynamic receiving threat. And I think you can pretty much play man across the board. Ideally, the man will, again, give the defensive line more time to get home because Veldtcamp is going to be like, okay, where's my matchup? Who's open most? And then that extra time should allow you to get home and stop the pass. In the run game, Western Kentucky is not going to run the ball pretty much ever, especially when they're going to need to score points to stay in this game and throw the ball. And BC, I think, is going to run the ball a ton just because I think the run game could be had against a smaller defense like this. I think they're just going to run the ball, especially in the first few drives, and just basically say, okay, if Western Kentucky, if you could stop this, then we'll change. But until you stop it, we're just going to keep running it down your throat with 12 personnel and heavier players.
And as we said on an earlier episode, it does not sound like Kye Robichaux is going to play, but I would expect a heavy dose of Turbo Richard and Trayshawn Ward. Which back would you use more specific, or would you go more with Ward in this one again, kind of like what we saw against Michigan State with a smattering of Turbo, or
I would love to see both on the field at the same time. I want to see more two-back personnel at a BCC, how the defense responds to that. I think you can use Ward as a hybrid player where he can go out into the formation and be a receiver. That might confuse the defense. We've seen it with some of those triple option looks they've used the last few weeks, so I'd love to see that. I think you're going to see a little bit of Dada Jones or Day Jones. I'm not sure exactly how it's pronounced. Daytrell. And maybe in some Jordan McDonald because he's a bigger back. He can give you that thumper up the middle. So you might even see a good bit of him just because I think they're trying to redshirt him because he didn't redshirt at UCF. But this is a game to use him where it's a smaller defense and you can just have him run people over. You don't necessarily need to worry about him being as fast. And it does suck that Kye can't play in this game, get his revenge against Western Kentucky. But, I'd rather see him try to get healthy for games that matter down the stretch.
In a moment, Mitch and I are going to wrap things up, and we're going to talk about our predictions for this upcoming game. You want to hear our thoughts in just a moment. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view the live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Now, we're going to do things a little differently here. I've heard from some folks that they miss Mitch and I doing our picks. And I said to Mitch today, when we're talking about FanDuel, let's do some picks during this segment. So, Mitch, we picked out 3 games that we picked out on FanDuel that we want to give our predictions on. We have Miami and Virginia Tech, Florida, Georgia and Alabama, and I'm blanking on the third one. What was
Louisville, Notre Dame.
Louisville, Notre Dame. All right, which one do you want to go over first?
Let's do Virginia Tech, Miami, because that's on Friday night, and I think people miss it because they miss fading your picks after last year. So currently Miami's favored by 17.5 at home. I'm probably taking Miami minus the points here because Virginia Tech has just not looked in sync, especially on offense at this point. Miami hasn't played really anybody, but they are just rolling every team they play. If this game was in Virginia Tech, I might be tempted to go the other way. Lane Stadium obviously has some magic to it, but in Miami, it probably won't be well attended because it's a Friday night in Miami. But I still think Miami is going to roll them here. Fun fact, Cam Ward and Kyron Jones are cousins. And they didn't find that out until they were in high school, which is a fun little fact when they were both playing high school there. But yeah, I'm taking Miami here at minus 17.5. The next one, I'm going to go to Louisville, Notre Dame. We'll end with the biggest game of the end. Notre Dame is minus 6.5 at home against Louisville. Louisville's 15, Notre Dame's 16 in the rankings. I feel like Louisville wins this one, they beat the crap out of Notre Dame last year in Louisville. But I think Louisville wins this one again. Louisville's playing a really good ball right now. The Tyler Shuck is a bit of a ticking time bomb in terms of his injuries, but as long as he stays healthy, this team can roll. I'm really questionable about Notre Dame. I think their defense is okay. Their offense is not very good. Riley Leonard, I think, is still hurt. So I think Louisville definitely covers this one, and I wouldn't be shocked if they went outright. Last game, Alabama, Georgia. Where did it go? I know it's a close spread. Why is it not showing up? This is great podcasting. There it is. Okay, so Alabama is plus 1.5 at home, which is pretty surprising. I'm also going Georgia here, minus 1.5. I probably wouldn't bet it just because it's such a small line, but I'm picking Georgia just to win because I think they're generally the better team overall. I think that Kirby Smart now has a major coaching advantage over Kalen DeBoer. He doesn't have to worry about Nick Saban. And I just think Georgia is going to, I think there's a weird stat where Georgia has only beaten Alabama once in the last 16 tries or something, which was the national championship a few years ago. But still, I think this is where they start kind of turning that tide, pun intended. Actually, not intended, but it's a good one anyways. So I think Georgia wins this one, and they'll probably be number 1 after winning this game.
All right, so I'm going to agree with Mitch on 2 of these. I'm taking Louisville, not Virginia Tech, Miami. And I'm going to go with Alabama. I think Alabama's going to beat them. Georgia's come out slow every game that they've had. And I think against a team like Alabama on the road, it's going to come back and bite them. So I'm going to go with that. Now, if you want to join us in our picks, you can go get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Just go over to FanDuel and make that $200. You get a $5 bet. With a $500 bet, you get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's FanDuel.com. Locked On Boston College, AJ Black here, wrapping things up with Mitchell Wolf, and we are giving our predictions in this game. Mitch, I'm going to let you go first on this one. What are you picking for Saturday?
I'm going to go BC 31, Western Kentucky 21. And I think my reasoning behind that is that, like I said, I think BC is going to want to run the ball, shorten the game, limit the number of possessions for Western Kentucky, give the defense rest in between possessions. And that's just going to lower the scoring for both teams. I think BC's defense is going to play better than that score indicates. I would imagine they might have one play that's a big explosive where they have a coverage bust or something. But I also think that touchdown by West Kentucky might come late, or late in the fourth quarter. BC's up 31-14, basically trying to salt the game away, and West Kentucky scores with just a few minutes left to cover, and then BC gets the ball back and basically just runs the clock out. So I think BC is going to perform very well in this game, but I'm not necessarily sure the score will show that. And I'm sure if BC doesn't come out to a fast start, I'm sure the fire everybody crowd is going to be back out in force. So I do not think this is going to be a trap game. I think Bill O'Brien is doing everything he can to make sure that doesn't happen. And I think we've seen this team be come out pretty prepared against every opponent they faced. Maybe they haven't started as fast against a team like Duquesne or even Michigan State, but I think that this game, I think they'll get out to some scores, but it's going to take a while just because they're going to try to kill the clock.
So I'm going with a little bit different here. I got a relatively similar score, but I'm going to go with BC 35, Western Kentucky 14. Mm-hmm. And because I think BC is going to win the physical advantage up front. I think offensively, the offensive line is going to push to get some big explosive plays. Mm-hmm. So while BC may try to drain the clock, I think they're going to find some big plays there. I expect a big game out of Trayshawn Ward and Turbo to get some of those big plays going. And I expect the defense to make some plays as well. I do think that Western Kentucky will score a few. The weather looks good for Saturday. It should be partly cloudy, around 71. So it should be favorable for potentially an offensive game. And it's homecoming weekend, so our family weekend, excuse me. So the crowd will probably be gone by halftime. Just kidding. Bill will get.
I'll say it's early in the day. They have time to get to their dinner reservations
right.
in North End.
and just remember, Bill will get pissed at you if you leave for halftime. So you got to stay there the whole game. So I'm going to go with 35-14, and that'll be my prediction for this one. All right, Mitch, we're wrapping things up here. Any last thoughts?
No, not really from me. I think it'll be nice to just watch this game on TV and not have to live and die in the rain like last week. But I think BC is going to really take care of business in this one. I think previous West Kentucky teams would scare me more, but I think over the last few years, this team has just gotten just incrementally a little bit worse every year, kind of since the first Bailey Zappa year.
And I think too, and I hate piling on Jeff Hafley, but I feel like
even Steve Adazio, like I would feel the exact same way about what you're talking about. Just any of the previous coaches, I'd be like, oh God, this is going to be a nightmare.
But Bill is so good at I feel already at getting this team ready. So I totally agree with you there. As I said earlier, we're going to have Jeremy Trottier of Eagle Insider covering the game on the site. I am actually going as a fan, as you can see, I got my BC sweatshirt on today. So this is my one game a year where I get to go with my family. So I'll be there and I'll be cheering along with you guys. So hopefully that'll be fun. And I'll be back once I get back out of the game. I will do the postcast once I get home. So it should be probably like an hour or so after the game ends that I'll get that up and running. So check us out there and follow us on YouTube or wherever you get podcasts. Mitch, where can people find you?
You can find me at Mitchell T. Wolf, WOLFE on Twitter. I'll probably be tweeting just for fun during the game. And then obviously check out our work at Eagle Insider. Just published my matchup report yesterday, and then the weekly preview will be coming out this morning or whenever you're listening to this, probably. And then obviously a lot of post game coverage, and then get into ACC season. And I've already started previewing Virginia for next week. Bill O'Brien can yell at me for looking ahead, but I'm not beholden to him. So, just make sure you check out our work there.
I love when people yell at us for that. I'm like, I cover the team. I'm not playing for the team. If I look ahead, that's kind of what I do.
It's like, the Virginia game time is new. It's like, why are you looking ahead? It's like, I'm just telling you what time the game is.
Yep. Yeah. And I also have to say, as we wrap this up, I also I'm going to say this they're still lurking out there because they keep commenting. The consistent Missouri and Michigan State fans that keep talking on my podcasts. Western Kentucky, no no disrespect, but I haven't seen any of them, and I've been waiting for them to come and chirp in our comment section, but they have not. But I still get those Spartan fans, and I still get those Tigers fans that are going in on it. So I do miss that, and hopefully when we hit ACC play, we'll have some Virginia fans and Virginia Tech fans coming in too. So make sure you guys are hitting up the comment section because usually they respond to you guys more than me. So anyways, this is AJ. Follow me on Twitter at AJBlack247. We'll see you all again on Saturday for the post game. Again, make sure you follow Locked On Boston Postcast to get it. It does not go to this feed. I will try to put it up as a post on YouTube, like a text post. But remember to follow along on that. It's just a different way to find us. And thank you all, and we'll see you all again soon. For Mitch, this is AJ. This is Locked On Boston College, your team every day.